Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up, Warped Tour? The state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media, the alternative music show. Sam here with Marcos.
Dare me to jump off of this Jersey bridge.
This very Jersey bridge.
This Jersey bridge right here in the studio with us today. I bet you never had a Friday night like this, bitch. We are recording this on a Friday night.
I'm sorry, is the Jersey bridge in the room with us right now?
It's been in the room with me for fucking 4 years, Doc.
Okay, sure. Okay.
I'm trying to free myself.
Okay, so obviously today is like one of the biggest release days in history, right? We got new Pierce Seville, we got new Yumi at 6, we got new Paramore.
I was hoping you were just going to leave it at new Yumi at 6 album.
It's just like...
It's the biggest day in scene history. A new Yumi at 6 album, delayed even.
Big album releases, but not only that, we got a newish Linkin Park song talk about in the news alongside new tracks from like The Plot and You, Yonaka, Dead Lakes. And I'm like incredibly excited to get into all these releases. So we're not going to like dilly-dally whatsoever.
None of that dilly-dallying. We are going to waste your time talking about our Patreon though. And our Patreon's great, Sam.
Patreon.com/SOTS podcast. We have a bunch of different tiers up there and you can get access to exclusive episodes.
Exclusive stickers.
This very podcast, early reactions to Brian Starr's interviews. You can get your name in the producer credits of this very podcast on a weekly basis. A monthly sticker, we got that too. We got a fucking crazy one this week for My Chemical Romance.
It's nuts.
It's absolutely unbelievable.
We have a merch store too.
Mm-hmm. Those are go ahead.
Visual watchers. See that logo behind us? We got a ton of merch with that on it.
That very logo.
Audio listeners, SOTS podcast.
Imagine like a deathcore logo for the state of the scene, and you have like a generally like pretty good idea of it.
It's on the episode art.
Those are the best ways to support us. The Patreon, the merch. Every link you need is in the description of this episode, as well as like the link to our playlist where every song clip you hear on the show, you'll find on that playlist, plus our Discord, all of our socials. We got a couple bands in the spotlight this week.
Two.
The Spotlight.
Let's start with Bud and their new track, Marty.
Think I lost my job and now I need a new one. Here's my resume, I guess I'm Caucasian. Sun still shines but everyone's snoring. Who the fuck's up at 6 in the morning? Now I'm flying, so lucky. Only fill up at the Texas Buc-ee's. I left my town.
Canadian rock and roll. Their debut EP 23 is out March 3rd. Follow them at Bud Is Bants on Twitter. One of the absolute best Twitter handles I've ever seen, honestly.
What is better, Sam, than Canadian rock and roll? Okay?
I feel like there's so much lore to this band already, and they haven't even dropped their first EP.
Like, and like, if I'm being honest with you, like that doesn't even like scratch the surface for me. Like, we talking Vancouver rock and roll? We talking Toronto rock and roll?
Part of me is starting to think that Bants might be some sort of like Canadian curse word, and I just don't know what it means. And I won't learn till like 3 years from now when I'm in Toronto and I use it like as a funny.
Don't tempt fate.
We also in the spotlight have Anchor and their song Oblivion. Alternative metal band from Catalonia, Spain. They have a new album due this spring. Follow them at Anchor, ANKOR Music on Twitter.
Me gusta esta música mucho.
Yo también. Absolutely sick bands. Get on them while they're hot. Be the first to say that you were a fan of Bud and a fan of Anchor.
Catalonia, a fucking Amity Affliction song title too? Or Catatonia?
Yeah, you were close though. You were like very close.
Are we just diving right into it?
I say we dive right into it.
The Breakdown.
Let's kick it off.
I say, oh shit, wait, were you, hold on. Were you saying dive in? Because that was like
Yeah,
a
a
really
little bit.
smooth
Just a
like
little bit.
transition.
Just a
All right,
little
run with it. Run with it. Run with
All
it.
right. This week, we obviously checked out the brand new album from Pierce the Veil, The Jaws of Life. It's the San Diego, California trio's 5th studio album, released February 10th via Fearless Records. The Jaws of Life consists of 12 tracks. It's around 42 minutes, and is stop me when it's enough longs. Long.
Okay, pause.
Overdue.
Okay.
Follow up to 2016's Miss Adventures LP. Little bit of fun facts here at the top too. Produced by Mute Math Singer. Fucking didn't put the guy's name, but he also previously produced Trench and Scaled and Icy by 21 Pilots. So guy's got some fucking, I wouldn't say bangers under his belt, but like decent albums, I guess.
Yeah, this for me feels a little bit like a label suggestion and less of a, this seems like personally the best choice that would suit this band.
What you are doing right now is setting the stage for the direction you want to take this review in, and I'm going to put some roadblocks. I will be putting roadblocks.
I'm trying to control the narrative.
It's the
real quick. Paul Meany is the vocalist.
Yeah,
of
Paul Meany. Thank you. First Pierce the Veil album with a title track.
Wow, big stuff.
And honestly, Sam, like Collide with the Sky, ugh. Selfish Machines, ugh. A Flair for the Dramatic I would have taken. Misadventures, no thanks. The Jaws of Life, however, like if we're gonna start kicking title tracks into the mix, good album to start with. I like this album title a lot. Really love it, actually.
Absolutely insane of you not to think that Misadventures actually would have made a sick name for a title track. I kind of feel almost that all of them would have. Like we should have been doing this from the jump.
I don't know.
I feel like you're really taking your time here because I think you're scared to talk about this album.
Nah,
which is why you have so many little fun tidbits that you want to get off at the top. You ever heard of a title track? Yeah, 1,000 of them, actually.
I'm scared for you.
You're scared for me.
I'm scared for you.
All right, so
because I'm ready to go to fucking war. Okay?
Hold on. Pause. Did we get the facts out of the way? Are we done with the facts?
Let's see. Texas is Forever. For a new drummer on this album. I don't think they were credited on any song.
That is a good point.
I looked on Wiki. Like nothing. I don't know. It could be somewhere. I don't know if I know that they've been using someone live, obviously, but I don't know if it's just like a session drummer, like a touring drummer or whatever. Like for all I know, fucking Vic did drums on this album. I don't know.
Okay.
Paul Meany.
Okay. Going into this, expectations astronomically high, undeservedly so?
7 months ago. Before we have, I don't know exactly what 7 months ago. Okay.
Let me take you back.
All right.
let
buckle
me,
in.
Buckle in.
So the reason I say a little while back is because prior to the singles, yes. And then we got the singles and I was like, oh, well, this is just a band I like returning. It wasn't like hearing Foundations of Decay by My Chemical Romance, right? Like Foundations of Decay was like now the problem with that song is now my expectations for the My Chemical Romance album are astronomical. Well, whenever that comes out 10 years from now, who knows? With Pierce the Veil, like, truthfully, like they were sort of like, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I liked the singles, but when Past the Nirvana came out, it was like, oh, well, this isn't Drown. This isn't like the song that changes everything for Pierce the Veil. It's a taste of a new direction and it's a new single and it's cool to have this band back, but it's not like a game changer.
And when you say Drown, you're talking about Bring Me the Horizon, of course. You're saying when that song came out, it felt like Bring Me the Horizon is taking a hold of the steering wheel and careening so far off the road, but it's somehow very exciting in the process, right?
And obviously, like, different circumstances, very much definitely not on like an unspoken hiatus. They were just in between album cycles with that track. But here, yes, like expectations, like I will tell you, yes, like expectations were still high coming into it because it's Pierce the Veil, cornerstone of this scene, a band I would have loved to have reviewed more albums from, but we're only on number 5, and we've been doing this show for fucking as long as that band has been around. Practically, it feels like, anyway. And like, this is long overdue, yes. And I do say, though, that like with all that in mind, after having heard the singles, definitely pump the brakes a little bit on the hype train. Having liked all of them too, and like Past Through Nirvana especially has grown on me. But the two that came immediately after that, Emergency Contact especially, I really gravitated towards. I really enjoyed them, but they were different, right? They were totally different. So now get into what you want to get into.
I feel like
I know that like you're just over there like.
I feel like I've put you on your heels for
loading rounds into your fucking Desert Eagle
in a way that I don't want to, because I don't dislike this album, and I really want to cement that right at the top here, that I didn't listen to this album and go, yeah, this is bad or anything like that. It just feels like my expectations were astronomical, almost irrelevant of every song that would have come out leading up to this, because there's just sort of like a myth and a legend to Pierce the Veil that I can't like disconnect myself from. For me, this band for some reason is not coming back with the album after Misadventures. This is the album after Collide with the Sky, because that's how I remember this band for whatever reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, pause on the Jaws of Life talk. Misadventures was a letdown, right?
Yeah, I thought it was underwhelming, but it's like underwhelming in a sense that a lot of albums are when they're coming off of, you know, you look at, to bring back the My Chemical Romance thing, how do you come off the Black Parade and not feel underwhelming? You know what I mean? So even when you look at that album and go, oh yeah, Danger Days is fine, but it's not the Black Parade, right? Misadventures was fine, but it's not Collide with the Sky.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, for me, it's like, this is Pierce the Veil's chance to kind of come back in like multiple ways, right? This is them coming back as the force of nature that I remembered them being in my head. They weren't just another band. They were Pierce the Veil, and that's completely removed about Misadventures being an okay album, right? And then obviously, you're right. Like, we get the singles, and it's like, things are a little different now, right? Where I won't say we're chasing trends, but we've grown with the times, right? This isn't some 2013 post-hardcore album. It sounds modern like a lot of other sort of like punk-leaning post-hardcore bands do. I feel that every single has grown on me since the first time I've heard it.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe Even When I'm Not With You, which I think I really liked off the jump. But for me, that single I think I like the best because it's the one that pushes the hardest to be different.
Right. It pushes to be different in a way that's not like, as far radio friendly leaning as it possibly can, but more in like this is just a weird version of Pierce the Veil, and it kind of works.
But you are right to be afraid, because I do have a lot of problems with this album.
Real quick before we get into those problems, did this get like an official day of release fourth single or no?
No, it did not.
Okay, interesting.
They released God, the name of the track escapes me, but they put out a track that was like, hey, listen to Australian radio and be the first to hear this song. And I don't know if that counts. There's no music video or anything. It was just like I think it was
title track, maybe?
No, Save the Empire, something along those lines. Yeah.
It's like the one long title on this album.
I have an extremely difficult time, more difficult than it should be, remembering the names and personalities of each individual song. And this sort of encompasses a lot of my issues with this record. I hate to come off starting on a bad foot, though. I would almost like to hear all the reasons you like this. take that in a little bit and then tell you why
You think I like this album, Sam?
Yes, that is the impression you've been giving me, right? Like, why is it that you really like this album? And then I'll tell you why I kind of agree with you but have issues.
So similar to the singles, at first a lot of it didn't click for me, but I just full transparency, after like honestly 5 or 6 listens, did this album really start to actually resonate with me. Songs really started to stand out more and more in a way that it's not just like, you know, you talk about how like you can't really pick the personality out of certain songs. Maybe initially that was the case for me too, but the more time I spent with it, it actually became really easy to pick the personality out of these songs. And you know, I don't have the track listing in front of me right now, but I think Shared Trauma.
That's correct.
Is like
track 11. It's like right before the end of the album.
Penultimate. Songs like that, I really started to pick up on like a lot of the nuances, like the outro of that song being like a 1-minute little dreamy dance pop thingy that they had going on really fascinated me. And it's probably not something I picked up on first listen. You know, there are things that you definitely pick up right away. It's that this is, and this is something that I really grew to like. It's the attitude of the album. Pierce the Veil are different from where we had last left off with Misadventures. Misadventures was like a really, at least the way I remember it was like a really hopeful album. And this one, on the songs on this album, Pierce the Veil are upset, they're jaded, sometimes like not indifferent, but like, what was the word I had written down? It's like it's hard to exactly put into words. Like jaded, upset, and like
bitter,
distant even.
Okay.
Like the Vic's delivery vocally on a lot of the tracks is just so like defeated. And it's such a stark contrast to some of the material that we've heard from this band in the past. And for me, I actually really like that. Not that, like, don't get me wrong. So a couple of things. I think this album is good. I like it. I like most of the tracks on here. I actually have grown to like even more of them again as I've continued listening to the album. And don't get me wrong, I would take every album outside of Misadventures that I've heard from this band over this one, right? This is like right off the top, if we're talking rankings, this is a firm 4th. I think it's a lot more engaging and a lot more interesting than Misadventures. Like I think that just flat out is the case, at least for me personally. And then it's a matter of preferences after that. Like you talked about Collide with the Sky. Like, okay, that's Black Parade. Nothing's going to beat that.
Mm-hmm.
Selfish Machines holds a really special place in my heart.
That's 3 cheers.
Yeah, right. And then A Flair for the Dramatic is like that first fucking My Chem album, which is like...
It's crazy really in the sense how mirrored their careers feel.
Kinda, yeah.
Right, in terms of like their relevancy and how they sort of exploded onto the scene. So, like I said at the top, I feel like this is...
Just to finish that thought, not to cut you off, like I would take older Pierce the Veil over this. Don't get me wrong. Like I get it. Like they're not heavy anymore. They're not as, maybe not as eccentric as they had been in the past, but I really like this different face that we are seeing of this band coming out of the worst years of everyone's life. There's a really cool clip on, I think might have been Resilience. I forget the exact track, but it's a pull quote from, it's like a sound clip from Dazed and Confused. And the line is like literally, you know, if I call these years the best of my life, shoot me in the fucking head or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, I think that really encapsulates like the entire like
overall feel of the album, record,
right?
Sure.
And I kind of like that. And it's not what I wanted heading into it, but coming out of it, I'm like, I like seeing this other face to this band. It's slightly more humanizing somehow. And for me, I don't know, I liked that. But get into what you were talking about.
I feel like I see all of the things you say, but I don't necessarily hear them the way that you did. So what I think is that this is a good album that's buried under the weight of some poor decisions. And I'm not really sure who to hold accountable for it. But this is what I hear when I listen to the album. I hear a band that is pushing to do something different, but every time they get a little too far, they're wrangled back in. And I hear it almost on every single song, where we start with what feels like an interesting idea, and we present a Pierce the Veil that maybe you're not overly familiar with, but before they're able to really push that idea forward, somebody reels them back in. They present a chorus that, to me, feels very similar to a lot of the other choruses on this record in a way that kind of makes them all feel like they bleed together, where the words are different, but they all tonally sound the same to me. And structurally, all of the songs feel like they follow a very similar pattern, where we go verse, chorus, meandering for about 45 seconds till we circle back to the chorus and then play ourselves off.
That's songs. That is songs in general, not like outside of Pierce the Veil. That's every fucking band.
That's not
Verse,
every
chorus,
band.
well, yeah.
And we're going to talk about other artists who really break this formula.
Don't start, because if it's Paramore, we'll get into that.
So it is Paramore,
But it's not.
But it is, and I think that in a lot of ways you are right? Like, you're right. Like, okay, so that's how a song is structured. But I think that there's not enough smoke and mirrors there if I notice it. You know what I mean? Like, once I notice it, I know something's gone wrong, because you're right. You should be able to just put out 12 songs like this. But if by track 7, I really start to pick up on it, then you haven't distracted me enough. And that's a lot of this record, is that I almost feel like my mind sort of like walks away and I glaze over, and I almost like forget a song halfway through it. And a lot of this comes from like...
Rewind just a little bit. Meandering?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying you don't like the bridges on this album?
It's not
I think they're actually phenomenal.
It's not the bridges. It's this point at like the 2:30 mark where the band is like, all right, we're going to like pepper in like a little bit of like a guitar solo here or something. Yeah. And it just never really, like, instrumentally, I don't really think this album does anything quite that interesting, with the sole exception of the title track.
I would not take it. So I'll give you this. Yes, you're right. Like, there are some easy guitar parts that like sound so phoned in at times, but
so much of this sounds like background noise, with the sole exception of Vic Fuentes' voice.
I'll disagree though, because I think that there's also equally as many great guitar parts on this album. And like,
it's not even that the guitar is it's not like the good. It's not as if the guitarist...
I think there's some really great riffing. Like the title track, the opening track, which is one of my favorites on this album, Death of an Executioner. I think that there's some like really fun riffage, and trust me, like it's not as vibrant
for me,
as it
something
was
is
in the
preventing
past.
it from all coming together.
So keep going. What else?
I think that part of the reason that I find myself sort of bored with this record is that tonally it always feels the same, and that there's sort of a flatness to it where even the more energetic parts feel like they never really explode. It feels like there's this really low ceiling for me, where even when I know this riff is going off or Vic is really leaning into this note or something, it's almost like... And part of me thinks maybe it's like an issue I have with the production, where everything is, it's almost like too clean and too flat, and just, it feels very lifeless to me. And I think that's when I go back to try to figure out what it is about this record that in my mind isn't working. I think it feels like a heavy hand in the production that is really muting this band.
So it it's not all of the same points, but this review reminds me a lot of when like, and it's like we're at opposite sides of the tables in comparison to that review, Classic Symptoms of a Broken Spirit by Architects, when we reviewed that last, where I think that some of the stuff that you're, dogging on this album about are intentional in, I think, a really cool way, which is specifically the fact that this is a gray album. Like the outlook is...
That's not my issue with it, because I don't dislike the tone in a conceptual sense. Like, I'm okay with a somber kind of miserable ass Pierce the Veil record, right?
Okay.
And like lyrically, I think that everything actually works.
Vic
right?
is still fucking got it lyrically.
But I just mean that there's like sort of a flatness to the overall sound of the band, where it's like the vibrancy and the energy and the style of this band. And I don't mean that in sense of how heavy they are or how much of a screamo band they are.
Yeah, but it doesn't like pop in the way that maybe you want it to, which I'm not going to take that from you. I don't know if I fully agree.
It's almost like they put like a filter over it so that everything just kind of sounds the same to me in a really bizarre way. And the only time that it really jumps out to me is when this band pivots in an unexpected way, in a sense that like you get like the feature, I believe their name is Chloe Moriando on the final track, and it's and I felt like somebody snapped me out of a nap. It's
Chloe
like
feature
it
is...
feels like completely unexpected, but it felt like everything before it was exactly as I anticipated, especially doing re-listens of this album, which I found didn't necessarily hurt, but I think it illuminated the flaws that I thought were there.
Had already perceived.
Right.
Sure. That Chloe feature is great. The song is, I think, 12 Fractures, and it's like Pierce the Veil does a couple of things. Like they're always going to knock it out of the park on their closing track. And I think it's always going to be the case with the opening track, but I know that you have your reservations about that one. Why? What exactly for that song specific? Because that, out of all the things you've mentioned, the fact that you don't like that song specifically,
because
irks me.
I think in the same way of every other song on this album, it's capped at the knees. I feel like it wants to be something that it's not allowed to be.
But what
you
is
know
the
what this feels
something?
like to me? Honestly, this feels like a major label release from Pierce the Veil.
It is fearless, right? Because like you could,
yes, but so were the last two records.
By ramen.
So was the last two records,
Yeah.
right? I don't mean that in a literal sense. Like I don't look at this and say, okay, the problem is Fearless. Fearless puts out a ton of albums I love, right? The Silver Scream 2, right?
Yeah,
came out what, like a year and a half ago? Not even.
Some people will tell you that's a fucking major label release as well, actually. So I don't know.
I just feel like I listen to a song like that and I hear what the band is going for, like their intentions, but it feels like every time they stray a little too far into what they're trying to do, they get reeled back in. And I almost kind of feel the same way about, a lot of people are pointing about the grunge sort of like influence on this album. And I feel like
early OOs, pop punk as well. Like there's a lot of like, in my opinion, a lot of like Yellow Card or something.
But I feel like they don't
there.
dive deep enough into it.
I don't disagree. Like I would have liked to see them.
I feel like
take
everything
a lot
about
of
this
what they
feels like
did.
a major label's like vision of what Pierce the Veil should sound like in 2023, and it makes so much sense to me when I say that out loud.
I can see it.
So it's not bad. There are plenty of good songs on it, but overall, I don't find the album that exciting to listen to, which is really frustrating.
I think my tolerance level for that type of stuff is different, which is why I kind of I kind of do think that this album is good and why I do like it. I don't know. I if I'm being honest with you, I think the reason why I really like, I keep trying to say like I really like this album. I don't know if that is the case, but like I am trying to catch myself when I get into that. But like there are parts contained within this album that I think are very much so inherently Pierce the Veil.
And when you point them out, I agree with you.
But what I'm trying to say is like, for me, what really pulls me in are like the meat and potatoes of this album, which is like, yes, like like you're talking about, like when I point them out, like, yes, it's good, but like Vic sounds really great. And I will give you that, like, yes, overproduced at times.
I don't think Vic's voice is anything that's wrong with this album. I think that is flawless.
I think
execution.
Flawless as well lyrically. You know, like we have a little bit of fun up top on a lot of the tracks with like one-liners. I think Jaws of Life opens up with the "maybe I should go and buy a gun" line, which I think is nuts. It might be 12 Fractures, which opens up with "am I still your excuse to go get high," which I really like that lyric. But like it's all of the stuff kind of like in between those little kind of like cool one-off things where it's like I love how the end of what's the song dedicated to his wife, that third single,
Even When I'm Not With You.
Yeah, I love how that song ends with like what is love besides two people trying to heal each other or something like that. It's fairly simple, but Vic's delivery, the way he sells a lot of the lines like that one throughout this album really helps immerse me in it. But it's also like some of the storytelling. And I think that's why a song like Death of an Executioner really is a track I'm drawn to, because we're kind of given the story of someone being trailed by headlights at night on a long, winding, open highway, and it's dark out, whatever. And I think Vic went into detail on like Apple Music about how that song's about how people are opportunistic when you're down and they'll jump at the chance to kick you when you're down or whatever. And the track title is essentially like the ending of the song, which is you kill the killer. You're the person who ends up killing the killer, Death of an Executioner or whatever. And it's all the stuff like in between that storyline where it's like, it's just the way that we're incorporating like death machine, demons in a death machine, can feel your stomach tightening. There's stuff that you can really only get from Pierce the Veil. And I think that we're still getting a lot of that on this album, which is why a lot of it is speaking to me.
I think you're still getting all of that from Vic.
I think there's some really great guitar parts on here. I don't really have any issue with this instrumentally. I think it's super toned down intentionally. And that's, again, like you say, like it could be a producer, whether it's the band's choice or not, whatever. But I think I really grew over time to appreciate how toned down it is and how gray it is. And for me, like, I like that, like, Vic's got a real fucking deadpan delivery at times, and I think that the instrumentals do a good job of matching that.
And I want to say again that when I say that I have issues with the tone, I don't mean the overall vibe that this record has. What I mean to say is that there is almost a specific packaging to each song, and the way that they all sort of share it. And, you know, you talk about all these great
I know what
lines.
you mean about how this kind of like blurs together.
You talk about all these great lines that Vic has on the record. And somehow I feel like even they get a little lost in the way that each song feels a need to sort of like heavy-handedly deliver its chorus continuously. There are almost a lot of choices on this record that I feel like are holding back even the better aspects of this record. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that Vic tells a story within the confines of what the song has to be. And in my mind, I imagine a version of this where you could tell that story in a more direct fashion that would have been more interesting than these very specific song structure that I feel like we're married to throughout this record, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about like, it's like this record has like a tone, and it's a tone that I feel like I almost feel relegated to attribute it specifically to like the production choices and stuff like that. Right. where it feels like there are a lot of decisions about what this record wants to sound like. And then there are the artists on here who are trying to make the record they want to sound like within the restrictions of everything else that comes first, you know? And that's where I really hit a wall with this.
Is it the whole album for you, or is it specifically like the...
I think it's the whole album when you take it in its entirety. And when you take songs individually, I think they sound a lot better, almost stripped of being a part of this album. Because I really didn't have any of these issues with the singles when I heard them until I heard them in the context of this record, right? And then when I go back and I sort of like piecemeal individual songs, I'm like, okay, I see all the really cool things about something like Shared Trauma or Jaws of Life.
Shared Trauma might be my favorite song so far this year, by the way.
It's very good, but something about it feels like the entirety of the record detracts from individual songs or individual elements within songs.
I'll let you have that. I do want to counter that, like, I kind of like that there is a through line that you can make between all these songs, because I don't think it was on Misadventures, and I think that was to its detriment.
Alternatively, though, I feel like it was to the benefit of Collide with the Sky, which I thought took a lot of weird pivots, and that was a really exciting record to listen to, right? So that's ultimately where I land on the album. It's like I listen to it and I'm like, oh, well, this isn't bad. I don't think Pierce the Veil really have like a bad record in them. It just feels underwhelming. And that's really frustrating because like the level of anticipation that goes into something like this is just astronomical. So in a sense, I feel like I set myself up for failure, but it almost can't be helped. And we had a patron actually send us a question. Nick asked, how different do you think your guys' opinions of the albums this week, you know, we'll talk about Paramore and You Me at 6 in a second, would be if you weren't familiar with the artist's existing work? And it's an impossible question. Like, I can't remove myself from that after the fact, you know? Like, we could do it like last week where it's like, oh, hey, you've never heard an In Flames record, so it's kind of neat to come in and talk about it for the first time. But I can't just pretend I've never heard the first 4 Pierce the Veil albums and try to come into this completely fresh. It's impossible.
Yes, but also no. Yes and no, I guess is what I mean. In the sense that, like, on paper and really in practice, like, if you were to just play me one of these songs, and I wasn't familiar with the artist, but what I will say is that, like, if you played me one of these songs, I would like it because I think that I just like that type of music. Does that make sense? It's like, you show me Shared Trauma by anyone, and I like it because it's a good song.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, but...
Well, yes,
that's not the case.
Specific
right?
question.
That's not the case.
Not that specific, right? I don't know. I think where I land on this album is that I like it. I certainly like it more than Misadventures. I like some of the risks they took here. I think that's getting sort of lost in the conversation. Is that definitely. They reel it in at certain times, and it's on the songs where they sound a little bit more familiar. But I do think that they take risks on this album. We haven't mentioned it. There's tracks on here, Resilience, I think the title track, that in the riffing and especially in the chorus, I get like really heavy impressions of My Chemical Romance. And they're softer stuff, right? But like I listen to those choruses
Vic's
and I'm
voice
like,
a little bit too.
He
the sounds a little bit like Gerard at times. Yeah.
But like it's the fact that it's like the choruses are very guitar driven at times, specifically on those songs, and like stuff for me like that, and Shared Trauma, like doing that weird little dreamy daisy thing in the back half. Like I hear that and I'm like, okay, well, this is something I've never heard from this band, and they're executing like pretty well on it, and I enjoy it. And I don't know. So again, like, I'll fully acknowledge that like they this is a band that I really used to love, and this is an album that I don't love, but I do like it, and it's never gonna be like old Pierce the Veil, at least maybe not right now, but I think that there's definitely something to like in the Jaws of Life, and I do struggle exactly to pinpoint what it is, but for me it's definitely hitting, it's resonating for now. This is an album I wish I could fast forward time to 6 months from now and see like where you specifically sit on it, and I guess where I sit on it. You know, again, this is really only first impressions. We've been listening to this album for 48 hours at this point, like not long. I really want to see if you end up sort of maybe enjoying a little bit more of it than initially you did here.
Right, like once the storm is quieted down,
right,
like
once the dust has settled, like where do you ultimately fall on this album? Like 6 months from now, I'm really curious to find out. But I could also see that being like you lean more into it and you definitely don't like
I'm curious where overall the scene's going to land on this album 6 months from now. You know what I mean? Because, you know, a lot of times albums come out at the top of the year and people are like, oh yeah, oh my God, I forgot like February and all this stuff happened, right? But it's like when you have something like, you know, the 3 releases we're talking about today, it's like you would hope that their staying power is such that, you know, 6 months from now, people are still talking about, oh yeah, when I'm thinking about the best albums I heard this year, it's like, oh my God, you know, February 10th was fucking insane, right? So let's get into one of those other albums.
Paramore. Brand new album, This Is Why. This is the Franklin, Tennessee Trio's 6th studio album, released February 10th via Atlantic Records. This Is Why consists of 10 tracks, clocks in at around 36 minutes. And same as Pierce the Veil, it's a long overdue one. Follow-up to the much anticipated follow-up rather to 2017's After Laughter LP. Important to note that this was produced by Carlos de la Garza, who has done like the last few, like at least the last 2 before this one.
Stick with what works, I guess.
Yeah, right.
God knows I've certainly never had an issue with the production on a Paramore record.
So I agree. Let's pick up where we last left off with some of the members of this band.
Okay.
So obviously they haven't.
So Jeremy's rap career has really taken off since we last spoke.
So good. Banger after banger. Maybe not the reason why there was such a lengthy pause between albums. I know that there was like sort of an unofficial step back from the band that Haley took at some point, but
I was going to say in the meantime, we did get 2 solo albums.
So that's what I'm talking about. So we got 2 Haley Williams albums, and important to note, at least Petals for Armor was produced by Taylor York, who's in this band.
And who I imagine probably had some level of involvement with a lot of what happens on this record.
Dude was hovering over the board, hovering over that shoulder. All right, hit me with a couple of things. What do you think about This Is Why? I guess we didn't really do much with where I was going. I was a little indifferent about the Haley Williams solo material. I really liked After Laughter. I'll actually say at the top, without getting into This Is Why, that before coming into this episode, that is very much my favorite Paramore album right now. After Laughter, I think, is the best Paramore album.
That's strong words. I feel like I have so many thoughts, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to start this conversation. I feel like very similar, and this is a bizarre through line to draw, but
take me there.
We talked a lot about how like an artist's solo material can end up influencing the band. And for me, this personally feels like the best version of a Haley Williams solo album, because once you bring the band in, it has everything that the solo albums were missing.
Yeah, I agree.
But I feel like I like that the Hayley Williams we're getting on this record feels like the Hayley Williams we got on those solo records. So for me, it's almost like a perfect marriage of everything that I think works best for this band, is that you have an artist who's deeply personal and who's willing to go out on a ledge and try some new things. And once you put them back in the driver's seat of this project, they're significantly, in my eyes, they're almost a significantly better vocalist,
better equipped for what this album is, right? Like if this was Hayley Williams coming off of After Laughter into this one, like the fact that like we got to maybe see some of what this album eventually ended up being, get sort of like practiced on with those two solo.
You have to wonder if they almost sort of help ease you into this transition, right?
I guess. This album's an interesting one in that like so I love Paramore. I didn't really spend any time with these singles heading into this record. I know that they were out, like it took me like a month to listen to the news, or maybe not a month, but like fucking 2 extra weeks longer than everyone else. And I remember being super hyped for it leading up to anything coming out. And then it was like a matter of, well, I'll just listen to everything when the album comes out. And I was still hyped, but it was like, I wasn't like obsessing over Paramore's return in the way that like having a new actual song to latch onto would, you would expect that to be the case. But so I really want to establish at the top that like didn't really spend any time with those singles coming out of this album. I fucking absolutely adore them specifically though. Really think that they're great. Really good representation of the album as a whole, even though it gets a little definitely different towards the back half. Like this is loaded at the front half with those singles. It's like 1 through 4, like you got 3 of those singles in there. I think this is a really, really strong album.
I think it's phenomenal, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely gorgeous.
So on first listen, up until the end, I was like, fucking album of the year, Paramore, in the bag straight away. Like, just cancel the rest of the year. By the time I finished the album, I was like, oh, maybe not so much. I don't know if I'm quite feeling the stuff on the back half. And then a couple of re-listens later, it just pulled me right on back in. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, this is outstanding. And it's, again, this is Paramore's 6th album, but like out of all of the bands in this scene, outside of like My Chem, I don't know if any of them have aged as gracefully as Paramore have. We're talking like, especially like their contemporaries in the quote unquote emo trinity that somehow has 6 bands in it. Like 21 Pilots have released a bad album. Panic at the Disco have released 7 bad albums. Fall Out Boy have released a couple bad albums. Like Paramore though, fucking still going really strong, arguably better than ever. Really the only competition at this point are My Chemical Romance, who's not going to fall off. Like I'm not going to allow that. Like if I have to step in, I'll step in, but like My Chemical Romance is not going to fall off. So like this album, I think in particular, really helps accentuate the talent level contained within Paramore and just how much left Paramore has to give. Paramore has a lot to say on this album, and I'm glad they get to say all of it. And I think the cool thing about This Is Why is it's got me eagerly looking forward to the next album. And this is the case with like After Laughter as well. And again, that's why I kind of shout out their contemporaries. Like Panic at the Disco never broke up. That last album wasn't really inspiring me to continue being a fan of that band or look forward to their next album. Fall Out Boy is kind of a different story now because we've got new stuff that I think is pretty solid. But like After Mania, like I like that album, but I didn't really care about Fall Out Boy at that point anymore, right?
Let's remove Paramore from the conversation of how they sit with other emo bands, right? That are their, like you said, contemporaries in terms of like popularity, right?
and impact in the scene.
I think what I really like about this Paramore record is that they are in no sense married to the expectations that so many other bands are almost weighed down by. You know what I mean? Where it really truly does feel like Paramore doesn't care what anyone asks for. They put out the record that they're interested in making. And that really shines through in something like this, where it just feels like you're getting something that, like, even if you looked at this album and thought to yourself, it's not for me, it doesn't click, it's interesting. And like, I feel like so many other bands end up sounding good but boring. And it's like, I'm almost more fascinated by Paramore taking absolute swings and what it ends up being. So like I went into this record and I thought to myself, based on the singles alone, the worst thing that could happen is I don't like what is ultimately a very fascinating album. Like for me, that's the floor. Like no matter what, this feels like it's going to be interesting. And it was interesting. And then ironically, I also ended up loving it a lot. For me, the hardest thing to do has been to separate this record from the other release we just talked about earlier, because I feel like this does all of the things I wish that did. It has this really vibrant and unexpected instrumental section where I can never pinpoint what direction the band tends to go in. So you'll get these tracks at the top of the album, like The News or like Comme ça, comme ça, and they're really like explosive, but then you'll get like these more like quieter stuff in the back end. And then you have like that combination of both of them all in one track with the title track. And at no point in this record could I predict what direction Paramore was going to go to. And there was something so fresh and exciting about that. And I mean that from very much from like the instrumental end of the band.
I think this is by far the coolest Paramore have ever been instrumentally.
Yeah, and they just feel like they feel alive, right?
Yeah. And like we talk about at the top how this is a trio, but I obviously don't think that it is at all the case like in practice on this album. Like I know that they've got a pretty big like backing band that I've seen them perform on fucking Jimmy Kimmel with, and I think that those people are all actively in the studio with them and really helping bolster the instrumentals on these tracks.
Right, and that's why this record sounds like it's really bursting with ideas, right?
Yeah.
What is predictable in the best way imaginable is Hayley Williams, who is absolutely committed to telling their story in a way that I really enjoy. Like I feel like this record is incredibly personal, similar to the solo records, in a way that other Paramore records have not felt, in ways that Paramore records have hinted at, maybe in more abstract and metaphorical ways. I feel like this is, it's almost more direct. And I feel like that is a product of the solo records in a way that, like, I think the writing style is very different, and I think it's extremely beneficial in making me feel much more connected to this band than I did on the last record, so that it's able to be quirky, but it still feels like it has this very like dire, serious core. But like it's literally in the delivery. Like they do as much as like prove that. Like there are songs where it's like Hayley will go into like this weird like character and it's suddenly like spoken word for like all of like a line or two lines, and then it's right back into this really powerful booming voice that Hayley is very much known for. But like I don't know, there's so much more character from Hayley Williams. It's not just like being vulnerable and willing to tell your story and all these different things. It's the fact that like Hayley Williams has improved at their craft so much, and that they're incorporating so many different versions of what they do. It's not just like cut and paste. It's like what's really cool about this album is I go into a song not knowing instrumentally what I'm going to get or at all what
Haley Williams is going to deliver.
Right. In terms of like their vocal style, right?
One thing I did catch on to, and I don't know about you, but like it especially hit halfway into this album. I think the track is You First. Does that sound right? Something First?
Without having the track listing directly in front of my face.
But like I started to notice, and I guess sonically it's there as well, but specifically I wanted to point it out vocally, is that I can't believe how much Haley Williams reminds me of Anthony Green on vocals.
I think part of this is that I'm starting to realize that there was sort of a chameleon-like aspect to Anthony Green where he almost sounds like every vocalist at once.
I don't know. Like
Anthony Green almost sounds like emo music. So it's like by virtue of that, everone seems
like
to have like...
It's not on the tracks that are like specifically
No,
more
it's not all
emo.
the time always.
It's
when I say emo, I just mean like the alternative music scene as like an overall...
specifically the track like Liar, which for me is like as far into Haley Williams solo material as they get. And for me, it's like, I don't know, on first listen, I really didn't like that song. And then eventually everything kind of grew onto me in a way that I sort of kind of would have hoped it would have. But that song specifically has so many, like the vocal delivery, the vocal stylings of Haley Williams on that song in particular really remind me of Anthony Green from Circa Survive, LS Dunes even nowadays. And you're right, like part of it is Anthony Green being a chameleon, but it's not other people that maybe Anthony Green ever emulates or reminds me of that Haley Williams is reminding me of. It's specifically that one artist. But that's all I really wanted to say there in terms of like the pattern I identified. But you're right, like it's a different Haley Williams on every song pretty much, and it makes for such a
there are these really hard contrasts throughout the record between like the vocals and like the instrumentals and stuff like that, and just sort of like the direction like a single song can go in, and like from track to track it feels like it's constantly pivoting in a different direction, maybe up until the end where we simmer down a little bit, you know. Yeah,
simmer.
Yeah, not intentional, but I feel like the worst thing that could have happened to this band is what people would have asked them for.
Someone else's rap career taking off.
No, is Paramore coming back in the resurgence of the pop punk emo wave?
Right. Are we coming back with a When We Were Young Fest classic, or is it something different?
But it's like, had you asked me 6 months ago, even I would have told you that's what I wanted. And like, in a lot of ways, it does work for other bands, because like, I was thrilled with that first single from Fall Out Boy. But now that I've heard this Paramore record, it's almost like they've corrected my viewpoint. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't know what I could have until I got it.
I don't know, like it's got to be subconscious in a way. There's something with like Paramore giving you an album you didn't think you wanted versus Fall Out Boy giving you an album you didn't think you wanted, and turns out you were right. Like the biggest difference that I can point to is the fact that it's so much more genuine and vulnerable. Like Fall Out Boy try something on Mania, and it's like, we're going to just try to write cool songs, and it doesn't kind of come off that way. And this is going to sound so cringe, but like Paramore write from their fucking heart. And this is very much a pandemic album. Like this album feels like it was written in, I was going to say solitary confinement. Not quite, but like that's what the fucking pandemic sort of was, in the sense that like there's some lines on here that really stick out to me. Forget the track, but one of them being something about going to go work on my social life.
See the chiropractor.
Exactly? Right.
Yeah.
And like that is your social life now. 'Cause that's just how it is nowadays. Or the song Running Out of Time, where it's like, gonna take my dog on a farther walk this time. It's like it's the fact that like Paramore can write something so simple and make it work so well.
It feels very human, right? There's a lot of soul to it.
Right, and Fall Out Boy is like, not to pit these bands against each other, but it's a really easy comparison to make, where it's like, Fall Out Boy's brand new album, Sam, we're going to talk about being fucking invincible, immortal, we're fucking champions. It's so dehumanizing in a... Like, this album is humanizing.
I don't know if I'm following your thought process at this point, but
I don't know.
I am in tune with you in terms of what Paramore did, and this sort of circles back to what you said earlier, right? Where you were talking about, hey, Paramore is a band who have done a good job of establishing themselves differently. Not every band has done that, right?
This is a very humanizing album. And like After Laughter sort of was, and so were all the other albums, but like this one in particular really clicks for me because I can kind of see the artists behind the art in a way that I can't with like Fall Out Boy, which is what I mean. Sometimes like you talk about like the songs.
And the big difference there is the writing style, honestly. And I think it's changed dramatically from where we were at with After Laughter, because I feel like where we generalize a feeling and an emotion, I think we very directly speak to it on something like this, and we personalize it so that it feels real, and it's not something that you're just being told, you're almost experiencing it as well.
Right.
And that's ultimately, it's like I walked away from this Paramore record and I just felt a connection to this band that I really don't think I've ever had.
Right. Like you'd never felt it in the past, which is neat. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to add about this album. I don't know. I really liked it.
I don't think I have anything else, honestly. I just really enjoy everything that it aspires to.
I do. Just because we're closing up on it, and I didn't really want to get into the conversation during the bulk of the review.
Sure.
But I think it's good that you draw the comparison between this one and the Pierce the Veil album, but I look at it under a different lens in that I think that it's all about intention and delivery and execution. And I think that both bands actually succeeded in what they set out to do.
And that's where I disagree with you wholeheartedly.
Let me finish. Because what I mean to say is that, like, again, we talk about like these being pandemic albums, whatever. Like this Paramore album is very lonely and very, I don't know how to really phrase it, but what I mean to say is that
they're different approaches to the same theoretical subject matter.
Right, but like the outcome is intentionally different. Like Paramore is very, at times, like hopeful and dynamic and glimmering and all these things. And I think that like Pierce the Veil pivoted and went in the same direction, just not sonically, but it was intentional. Like, I think they wanted to be a little less, like we talk about how like the instrumentals really stick out on this album. I don't think that you take the instrumentals or the approach to the instrumentals from this album and apply it to Pierce the Veil and it makes a better album. I don't think that's the case.
No, they're two completely different styles, but that's not my overall issue with it. And I'll reiterate what I hear are two bands that conceptually had the same idea, but one of them I think was able to lean in and deliver because it's almost like, for me, one feels like the commercial version and the other one feels like the artistic version. And it's surprising to me that Paramore is that artistic version and Pierce the Veil,
on the actual major,
being on an actual major label, feeling like a band that maybe is slightly shackled to the idea that they need to hit top 40, right? But alternatively, it's almost like Paramore feels like a band who just like had complete control of what they wanted to do, and they were able to come out and put out a record that really spoke to me, and all of the elements about it ended up being so interesting because it's not buried by the weight of a formula or any outside influence in the way that I feel that Pierce the Veil record is, right? I can't ever directly say what happened or whose intentions it was, but when I listen to that Pierce the Veil record, I feel a band that aspires to be all of these things, but they're constantly held back by what feels like other people's decisions, and they're never able to really do it. They're able to show you what it is that they wanted to do, and sometimes it almost reaches those heights, but I feel like every time it has an opportunity to really break through the way this record does, it has to be drawn back into the things that it's forced to do. You know what I mean?
Yes and no. But it's interesting. It's all very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting, right, comparing these two records. And then, of course, the third one we're going to talk about.
You mean at 6?
That's correct.
Truth Decay, their new album. This is the Weybridge Surrey Outfit's 8th studio album, released February 10th via Rise Records, at least distributed by that label. Truth Decay consists of 13 tracks, clocks in at around 46 minutes, and, of course, is the follow-up to 2021's Sucker Punch LP.
So, you know what's fascinating about the Yumi at 6 album is that how it compares to the other records that dropped on this same day, right? Like it's almost impossible for me to remove Yumi at 6, Paramore, and Pierce the Veil from each other, having them all drop on the same day, having them all have sort of similar reputations, slightly similar styles, not so much at this point in their careers, but like in my head, these are all 3 massively big, once, if not still, emo-inspired acts, and they all sort of aspire to it's interesting to look at like what a record is going for, and then like, do they nail it, right? And I think Yumi at 6 absolutely nails what they were going for. I think Yumi at 6 is still hungry. And what they wanted to do was to showcase on this record that hungry they are.
I don't remember what the exact quote was, but Josh, their vocalist, I remember saying something about how like these little fucking punk bitch bands nowadays trying to do our sound back in the day. All right, we'll run it back and we'll do that sound again because we're the ones that are best at it.
But what's crazy is that, like, right, the quote is saying, hey, Yumi at 6 is looking at all these other bands sort of jumping on a wave right now and saying, like, yeah, let me show you how it's done.
Yeah.
But I look at them almost in comparison to all of these bands who, like Pierce the Veil and Paramore, who are like legendary huge acts. And for all intents and purposes, Yumi at 6 might not be quite as popular, but they hold a similar space in my mind, right? But the difference for me is that this band still plays like they have something very serious to prove, and they communicate that immensely well on this record. You feel that energy from them with every single song, is that Yumi at 6 is still extremely hungry in 2023. And they're hungry for the same thing that they've always wanted, right? And it's like, part of you is like, this band could do the same thing all those other bands is doing and pivot and try something new and like maybe present this band differently in a way that like is like a natural transition, right? But it's almost like they're going against the grain by doing exactly what in theory people would want them to do. So it's like I was talking about earlier, it's like the worst thing I ever could have wanted is for Paramore to go, yeah, we're just going to do like this punk rock record after I heard the album they put out and how different and interesting it is. But alternatively, Yumi at 6 went and said, yeah, we're going to deliver exactly that type of record. And then when they nail it, it's like, goddamn, they were so right. They are so fucking good at being an emo rock band. It's crazy.
So fully agree that this band nailed it, but like What's funny too is out of all the albums this week that we're going to talk about, that we've gotten to, this was actually the one I was most scared about, because none of the singles had really clicked leading up to the album, and different from like a Paramore or even a Pierce the Veil, like I did spend time with them, but none of them were really clicking.
And I kind of agree with you.
What's funny is this is a classic example of contextualized within the album. Hey, I really like deep cuts. Hey, I really like my dopamine. Hey, I really like, oh, suddenly there's 6 singles on here. And it's like, oh, I kind of really liked all of those. I don't know what I was in my own head about.
They almost felt new again listening to them on this album. It's like suddenly I felt like I was hearing mixed emotions for the first time. I was like, I know I heard this song when it dropped, and now I'm hearing it again in this album. And I'm like, well, no fucking shit. This was a single, but
specifically.
But why didn't it feel quite as powerful as I was listening to it now, right? And I think a little bit of that as well is taking this album, comparing it to the other releases that came out this week. This just feels like explosive by comparison.
Yeah, they're like
there is an energy here that is just like this band is vibrating with it.
Like we talk about like Paramore, like having really dynamic sounds and progressions and all these different things. Like, sure. But like when Yumi at 6 lays down a riff this week, like that's what I'm fucking moving my body to. Like that it hits, right? Like it's hard. And it really helps too that you talk about going against the grain. Like there's some like meaner songs on here that like Yumi at 6 haven't tried their hand at.
Does try things.
Yeah.
Yes. And they try things within like probably the safety net of what are the other songs that sort of surround them. And it's like, okay, like, do I think this album knows exactly what it wants to be, right? And it nails it. And to be fair, I think part of the reason is that Yumi at 6 maybe plays it safer than like the other 2 bands we've talked about, right?
Yeah, there's definitely moments.
I don't think their swings are huge, but there are swings.
So, and that's kind of my problem at times with this album is that I see those swings that really could have been home runs that end up being like pretty good. But like there's some really incredible buildups on this album that I specifically, and it's my favorite song on the album, all like regardless of being slightly let down with it. After Love in the After Hours, I think is the full title. It has this really insane buildup. And like just for that one brief second before it kicks back into the chorus, I'm thinking like, are you guys gonna are you gonna go all the way? Like, is it just gonna go absolutely fucking insane, stupid in here?
Right.
And it doesn't. And it's like, well, I do wish they were like a little bit more innovative in that, or maybe not innovative, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I do wish they pushed the envelope just slightly more.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Right. It always kind of ends up being a Yumi at 6 that you have heard in some capacity in the past. But like there's these brief fleeting seconds where it's like this could be the game changer right here, and it's not.
But
and
it's
another
like, how
song
do you get
is,
upset with a band like this when their choruses are as catchy and as good as they are? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's almost like this band. It's like they almost challenge your own perception of like your criticism, right? So it's like you want to come in here and be like, I don't know, I feel like you really could have pivoted and done something different here, but then you hear that chorus, and it's like, yeah, I
that's
know
exactly
that,
what
but like,
I want.
what am I gonna say?
Exactly
you know
what I
mean?
Yeah. The other song that I think sticks out for me in that same breath is the song featuring Shikari and Shikari, Reynolds, whatever. It has this really intense buildup. It's insane. And
it has such a fun name.
Right.
It's like, yeah, no, future or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Rue's going in right now, whatever. And like, this is Enter Shikari on a Yumi at 6 song. Like, are we about to get crazy? Like, again, like same, because I think that song might come before or after. And like, it's 2 instances where I'm like, now I'm getting like blue balled because I'm like, Yumi at 6 is going to pull something crazy on this album.
But then when they do,
is it?
And when you hear a track like Breakdown, and suddenly like we've completely flipped our
Breakdown's
vocal
fun.
style, right?
Breakdown is a Chase Atlantic song.
Yes, it's a Chase Atlantic song as presented by Yumi. It's like
I mean that in the most respectful and grateful way possible.
what I just want to make sure that I sort of balance expectations a little bit for when you hear a song like that, right?
But like, yeah, no. So specifically, like they do try some different things on here. Like on that song in particular, like Josh like is spitting just a little bit, and like there's certainly some different things they try on here. But yes, it's certainly much safer than especially that Paramore album. It's not as different from their core sound as like the Pierce the Veil album.
But
is
it's
for
not
them.
fucking safe in a boring way is what's crazy. You know what I mean?
No.
Is that when you think of that, you think to yourself, oh yeah, this record's really safe. It's like, oh yeah, it's like Yumi at 6 is running it back again. But like Yumi at 6 is running it back. But like at 120 miles an hour. You know what I mean? It's just like it's almost like through just the pure energy that they deliver everything with, they fully convince me that this is exactly the record that needed to happen. And I think that there's something to be said for a band who's just so immensely good at their craft. You know what I mean? And
8 albums in, yeah.
Yumi at 6 just absolutely nails everything that they go for here. There's an absolutely beautiful synergy, by the way, between like every member of this band, and it makes songs feel like just like the writing is just absolutely perfect in a sense that like the way that each track like ebbs and flows, and when certain aspects come in, and the way that like they drive one another, it's just the marriage between everything happening on this record is just perfect.
This is gonna sound a little fanficky,
It's like
but
insane the synergy between these members.
Off the back of that comment, I could so easily envision this band in the studio and one of the members being like, oh, you know what would sound really cool for this next part? And someone cuts him off right before he finishes. He's like, already beat you to it.
Really? That's
and
a
they
hive
step right
mind.
into it. Right. It's a hive mind. Exactly. This is a better album too than Sucker Punch. Like almost comfortably.
Yeah, I really do think it is. And you know, when I say, you know, a band that's this good at their craft, it's not like their discography is like flawless or anything. You know what I mean? It's not like every Yumi at 6 album is
discography is with flaw. Yes,
is fucking incredible, right? But I mean, like when I come in and I listen to a record like this and everything clicks, it is so impressive, and it really establishes why we look at this band in the light that we do, right? It's why Yumi at 6 can have a couple albums that aren't perfect, and then this comes out and I'm like, this is Yumi at 6. Like, this is the reason I look at this band with like such a glow in my eye.
And I really want to emphasize Sam's attitude reaction here during this review, because I think, like we mentioned at the top, singles didn't really click for us, and I'm kind of worried that some of their fan base as well. And I can't emphasize enough again how much this is like, how fun of a trip this album is. Like this, you want a Yumi at 6 album, like this is a fucking great one. This is a really great time.
It's like I finished it and I couldn't wait to listen to it again. It was like, you know, we had 3 albums, and one of them was a gray day, the other one was a rainy day, and then this one was like, even though there is some, you know, less than positive lyrical material, like this is a fucking emo record as well, but the fucking energy of it just felt like a ray of sunshine when compared to like everything else that I'd been listening to, right?
When it's funny too, because like it is insane in a day where you finally get a Paramore album that's been due for 6 years, a Pierce the Veil album that's been due for 7 years. You're sitting there like as those albums are finishing up, and like you're tapping your feet, like you just want to get to the fucking Yumi at 6 album because it's a lot of fun.
Right.
You just want to return right back to it.
And it's nice to have that diversity in releases, right? It's not like I didn't enjoy aspects of those other records for what they were bringing, but it was just in terms of like, what did I have an absolute blast listening to? It was this record. Like, this is fucking fun. Like, and part of that almost feels like maybe cheating, right? Where it's just like, you know, the band almost feels like maybe they get away with murder in a sense that it's like they can put out a song that's like the 90s kids, where it's, in a way, I almost see through its sort of algorithmic SEO content driven lyrics, but I don't care. Like, I don't even fucking care.
We talked
It's
about
just
it earlier,
still
like,
fun.
Fuck, like, my tolerance level does not give a shit about that type of stuff anymore. If it's a fun song, I just like it. Like, I don't really care.
Yeah, but not every band can pull this off. It's what I
Yeah.
mean. It's like Yumi at 6 can almost like convince you that a song that maybe, even though aspects of it are imperfect, because Yumi at 6 is delivering it, it still works. And I think that's ultimately like circling back to the point the band tried to make. It's like, yeah, all of you can do our style, right? All of you can like sort of try to like rebrand it as like this new wave, but it's like, no, let me show you why we're goated at this. You know what I mean?
Only we can do it like this.
It's
Yumi at 6.
I was like, I fucking listened to this and I was like vibrating. I was like so happy with it.
But again, like I love that that's our reaction coming out of it, because again, like out of all the albums this week, like somehow I was most scared that I was gonna dislike this one the most. Turns out I liked all of them, but definitely, I don't know, tweet at us at SOTS Podcast your thoughts on these albums. I was gonna say tracks. I guess that's what an album is, though, right? It's just a bunch of tracks.
It's just an album, just be
a bunch of
tracks.
tracks.
It's just be tracks organized in a random order.
Well, sometimes it's specific order.
Occasionally. Patreon.com/SOTS podcast. Again, if you enjoy the show and want to support us, every link you need is in the description of this episode, including the Patreon, as well as our playlist for every song that you hear on the show. You can find on that playlist all of our socials, our Discord, our merch, you know. Some news this week.
The news.
In the news this week, Marcos, Linkin Park have released Lost. This is a never before heard song from the Meteora archives, which is to say that it's not technically a new Linkin Park song, but it's a never before heard song, and Chester Bennington is on vocals.
New to us, new to Linkin Park fans. Yeah, Chester Bennington, obviously the vocalist of, the late vocalist, of course, of Linkin Park, on vocals. Never before heard, and maybe even, especially for us, fans of Linkin Park, never expected to be heard. I never really... I mean, I kind of figured they had stuff in the vault, but I never thought we would hear it.
Yeah, you know, it's difficult to say exactly how much material this band is sitting on, but you have to think over the span of their career, you know, part of the reason this is coming out is that's 20-year anniversary of Meteora this March. That's a lot of time to have left behind a lot of scraps that never made official albums and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It actually wouldn't entirely surprise me if there's a lot more than this, but you know, maybe not enough of it is fully fleshed out to do what they did with this track. You do wonder what exactly they did do with this track. You know, how much, you know, additional time and effort did they have to put into it, or was it mostly finished and they just chose not to include it on the album?
Remaster it or something from whatever its original production was. I guess hard to say, but like what you said in terms of like this being a fleshed out track, like boy does it sound like one.
Yeah, and it also sounds like this like time capsule in a very bizarre way, because it's not only are we getting what for all intents and purposes feels like a new song from Linkin Park with Chester on vocals, but it sounds like this relic from exactly 20 years ago of almost like how the vast majority of us close our eyes and remember this band sounding like.
Yeah, this is, I mean, sonically, right? And then they definitely lean into it from the visual aesthetic as well. Like this video feels like what do they call them? AMVs, animated music videos.
Yeah, so similar to like Breaking the Habit.
Well, right. Like, well, yes, but like in every other Linkin Park song that everyone else threw over Dragon Ball Z fight scenes.
Sure, I understand what
right?
you're saying. Right. So it's almost like it's very much in the spirit of how you would have experienced the song had it come out at the time.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this just insane amount of like synergy, I guess, between every aspect of this. It's weird when this was announced like earlier in the week. Initially, I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And then the other part of me, like once I like settled down a little bit, I was like, this is weirdly sad.
Yeah.
You know, not in a way that's like, I don't want this, but it's very difficult to sort of balance my excitement with like the sadness that I have at the idea that like I'm getting a new Chester song, but
bittersweet. And,
right.
And the reason why is because it's obviously a reminder of the reality in which we live in, where Chester's no longer with us, and Linkin Park's future is still like, there's only so many anniversaries you can celebrate until it's like, well, what is that? Band?
Technically infinity amount for what it's worth, right? I just feel like this is exactly what I would want from this band in 2023. I don't want how do we move forward.
No, of course not. No.
I want how do we continue to celebrate this band, even though, you know, they've sort of, you know, had to experience this like immense tragedy, you know?
I mean, this is a really beautiful way to celebrate it. Like, I think that the rollout, the execution, all of that was very tasteful, and it doesn't feel at all like listen, all of the time, all of these posthumous, I think
Posthumous, yeah, that's correct.
Releases we see from, you know, every artist across all genres, where someone passes and then it's how do you exploit that tragedy and make money off of it, right? And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like Linkin Park being like, well, we can't really give our fans anything but this, so here's this and enjoy it. And but like from a very, again, like very respectful approach, and I appreciate that. And to your point, like this feels like a celebration still, and that's kind of all I need Linkin Park to ever be moving forward, is just a continued celebration.
It is such an out-of-body experience, though, watching the video to this, which is very beautifully animated, and to see like a representation of like Chester on screen, even though they're being animated, it still feels
it's hard
like
to look at.
It's just like, it's almost difficult to wrap my mind around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Talk about hard to wrap your mind around. Like it's for me, it still feels crazy that this is now a song that we've heard.
Mm-hmm.
And it exists and whatever. Like part of me thinks that like I don't know, it's hard to really explain that this doesn't feel real.
That's part of it. And I think what feeds into that is the very much almost the impossibility of everything that I feel like we're experiencing with this. It's like, it's almost like this shouldn't exist, but it's like,
because how could it?
Right. How could we be getting this in 20? It feels like an impossibility that's sort of been like that manifested somehow, which is maybe part of the reason that it feels so incredibly special.
Totally. Also in the news are The Plot in You with their new song Left Behind.
I still keep your secrets, know your worst mistakes, played into my weakness, stripped away my strength. One day you will set this over, I will truly.
The Watch the Divide tour, with support from Holding Absence, Thornhill, and Banks Arcade, starts this April with, of course, your headliners, The Plot and You.
I saw that tour announcement and I thought to myself, this cannot be topped. I almost instantly forgot about the Fall Out Boy, Bring Me the Horizon co-headliner.
Right. Listen, I can't imagine it's been completely lost in the fact that like Plot and You are embarking on their new headliner. We'll get to the song in a second, but I love the weird Thornhill holding absence bromance that has blossomed here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, we're going to North America. You want us to tour with you? The Plot and You? You're taking our boys with us.
It's right.
Because they did it with Dayseeker, and now they're doing it again. And next year, Sam, we're going to be sitting right here having the same conversation. And it's like, Bring Me the Horizon embarking on their next tour with support from The Plot and You and Thornhill. Or Holding Absence and Thornhill.
Right. They're just like, they're almost inextricably tied together.
Right.
It's like,
why are these bands intertwined?
I will only tour North America if I could bring Thornhill with me,
They're
or
not
vice
from
versa,
the same
right?
continent. Make it make sense. I really dig this new song Left Behind more than I did. I believe it was the Divide,
Yeah,
that
that's
last
correct.
single. This one's definitely clicking for me a lot more. I guess it helps that it has a video, because I don't remember Divide having one at the time.
Divide got a video, but it got it kind of like a
Eventually.
couple weeks after the
Yeah.
fact. Yeah.
So like right away, this
Very
one
similar, by
clicks
the way,
for
if you
me.
never had a chance to watch it. It's very
Yeah.
aesthetics driven and not so much a band performance or a story.
And that was kind of where I was taking this, where it helps that we got the video on first listen, but I don't think that this video really adds much to, like, I don't think it really buffs the song up in any particular way.
I think that's the issue, is that I think separate from one another, you have a very beautiful video and a very good song. And then together they just don't mesh well, right? Where I feel like that
To the point that it takes you out of both.
a little bit. Yeah. You're almost distracted by the video and then find yourself being pulled back into a song, and they just don't speak to one another, right? It feels like two great ideas that just don't go well together. It's been very odd watching The Plot and You have their rollout campaign of new material post their viral success and not, to me, feel like it's resonating in the same way that I would expect it to. You would almost think, almost like in a snowball effect, the best case scenario is that once you have that viral success, there's a bit of a payoff where your next couple songs, almost irrelevant of like how they compare to your other material, would perform incredibly well just by virtue of coming off the heels of that, like your name being on the tip of everyone's tongue for a minute, right?
Yeah.
But it feels like something somewhere isn't quite capitalizing on it the way it should be. And I think part of the problem is that this band being missing from this video, it works against them, where it's like it almost might work for the video, where we're forcing them into this like really clean, beautifully like aesthetic little mini indie film, and then just having parts of the band on there. But I feel like it's almost making The Plot and You feel faceless in a way that I think is almost working against them.
For a band, especially fronted by Landon, that has such a recognizable face, recognizable
Strong
voice,
presence,
character, yeah, it feels a little lacking. I don't know. This, you're right. Like there just
feels like there's a
should be
disconnect here somewhere that I can't quite put my finger on.
Me neither. It's funny. You're right, because it feels like there should be a bigger appetite for this band at this time, but I think that it's there, and I think that it almost feels like it's The Plot and You who are fumbling here, and all of this to keep things in perspective. Like, good song, good video. Like, I don't think The Plot and You they're not falling off, nothing like that, but it feels weird to watch things kind of like the things play out, and in your mind you're like, okay, well, all these other bands that have found viral success right now, like everyone's foaming at the mouth for New Sleep Token. People are rabid for whatever Bad Omens are going to do next.
Bad Token would be a crazy split,
it'd
though.
be crazy. Uh, and then there's the Plot in You, who had a song that went like fucking gold, platinum, diamond all at once. And it feels like their fan base is down for the stuff, but I also don't really, I don't know. It's the same energy's not really surrounding
Right,
that.
and that's what I
concerning
can't quite
way.
figure out. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody fumbling the bag
but
or
no,
anything. It's almost like a confusion on my end.
I
It's
do
like,
think that
where are
you-
we not connecting here?
Right. I think you did point at like where they're not connecting though. It's just like, okay, well, who are the Plot in You? Well, I don't know anymore because they're not fucking featuring themselves in their videos.
Right.
It's
It's ironic when you compare this to like Sleep Token though, because it's
I-
like,
I
who is
know,
Sleep
I know.
Token? No idea.
but
Here's
that
four
is- that is
visualizers
the
as my signals, right?
Literal appeal. That is
Yeah.
the literal appeal of Sleep Token. Whereas the Plot in You, it's like, okay, well, I don't exactly know what the appeal is there, but like, I should be able to find one, and I can't.
You're right. It's like, why is everything feel right, but I'm not seeing it translate the way I would expect it to? And I don't have the answer, but part of me feels like I'm curious how much of this we are going to continue to witness, and then maybe how much of it we've already witnessed without even really noticing. Because you think of a band like Pierce the Veil and how King for a Day went multi-platinum TikTok gold.
Right.
And then you look at the new songs and I'm like, I don't know that any of them had the same resonance as that.
Of course not. That said, like pretty healthy streaming numbers. I think before our Pierce review, I checked their Spotify and it had like Pastor Nirvana specifically has like just it's closing in on 20
But it's
million
less
streams.
the streaming numbers. I'm talking more about the conversation.
Okay.
Like when you talk
Yeah.
about Bad Omens and Sleep Token, you just talk about bands that are constantly being like talked about on a regular basis, almost when they're even not doing anything. And it's like the Plot in You should have just wriggled their way into that same level of like
Right.
consistent
Yeah.
discourse. And not only that, but they're putting out songs that feel kind of good. So it's like, where are we missing?
Right. So why isn't that working now? And it's hard to say because
And it's weird to come
especially-
in down on like an overall like visual that I liked and like a song that I liked.
right or
It's
to
almost like
shine that light on that.
it's almost like a completely different perspective that I want to look at the Plot in You. The Plot in You is still a great band, and they continue to be
Excellent
a fucking
band.
great band. You know what I mean? Dead Lakes have dropped their brand new track, Strange Juice.
Have you ever felt your heart race? Felt my best self when I switch lanes. Sometimes to growing, need change. I don't wanna be a burnout. Heartbreak.
Debut album Daydreamer out March 31st.
All good. All good.
All good things.
Strange Juice is such a great title for a song.
It is a good
It
title.
should have almost been title track.
You're right. I agree
Like
with
that,
you.
the album should have just been called Strange Juice by Dead Lakes.
Speaking of very beautiful aesthetics, this video really leans into like specific color palettes and like visuals that feel very satisfying in ways that are like proven track records.
Oh, for
Dead
sure.
Lakes almost reintroduces themselves in like the most digestible way imaginable. You know what I mean? Like here's Dead Lakes in neon lights. Here's Dead Lakes in like a cottagecore aesthetic.
They handpicked like two known working aesthetics and ran with it, and here we are. And it's like, okay, well, it worked.
This band has come out of the gate being extremely good with every single track that they've ever released. And
Yeah.
this feels slightly different than the other ones, where this almost has more of that sort of modern R&B meets post-hardcore that we've seen from a lot of bands. And God, when a vocalist is really good at it, it's very obvious.
Yeah.
Like when you know they are in some sense engaged with the culture and not just attempting to replicate or mimic it.
Yeah.
You know, I look at a band like Dead Lakes very similar to I look at a band artist like Not a Toy. You know what I mean? Where when I see them do this style of music, it almost comes too naturally to them
No, yeah.
in a way that's incredibly beneficial because it makes for really great songs.
Not a Toy is definitely the first band that jumps out as like a recommended if you like, at least around.
But you
these
pointed out at
parts.
Chase Atlantic, which is almost like the monument of what you'd aspire to in an instance like this.
This has heavy Chase Atlantic vibes, and trust me, it's a different band, but like they're
In terms of being, what is a band who's like within the alt community who wants to sort of showcase the ways that they are like pop music. For me, Chase Atlantic is the pinnacle of that within our scene. And then you get these littler artists like Not a Toy and now Dead Lakes who showcase that they are also very good at this.
Totally. And again, Dead Lake's a band that we actually really haven't even discussed much on the show because they haven't really done much. They haven't been around long. They haven't released a ton of material.
I'm almost positive this is a pre-COVID pandemic
2019
slowdown
EP,
and
I
now
think,
almost
maybe?
like starting
Yeah.
over again,
But what I meant to say is just like there's a reason we're discussing them so early in the hierarchy of the news because we really like Dead Lakes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They're
yeah.
really awesome.
For those of you who haven't heard that EP, it's incredible.
For sure. And again, it's been so long since we've really heard from them. I think they might have had another single between then and now, but Dead Lakes is one of the more promising up and comers, and I really suggest that everyone just checks them out today or as soon as possible.
Yeah, Dead Lakes is a band we're talking about that you haven't heard about, just so that a year and a half from now, they'll be a band you're extremely aware of.
Veil of Maya have released Godhead. The band is teasing big things for 2023, inclusive of a new album. That's an important one because Veil of Maya has gone on record, I'm pretty sure, as saying they did an album and then they scrapped it. And now we're kind of hearing brand new material.
I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty fucking frustrated with this band at this point. This is like the 5th grade song they've released where our conversation around it has been exactly the same.
Right.
There is a
That's why I cracked up
undisclosed
reading.
album that is on the horizon at some point,
And it's
apparently in 2023.
it's frustrating because like Veil of Maya's
How many times are we going to do this fucking dance?
quietly the best band in this scene.
Godhead is absolutely fucking insane. Like, holy shit. Godhead starts off and you're thinking, this kind of sounds like a lot of other deathcore songs, and then it loses its fucking mind.
Starts off amazing.
And that's before somebody in the music video pulls out a fucking katana.
Starts off amazing and it keeps getting better. Like the song doesn't let up to the point that it's like it is at its best in literally its final seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Godhead's wonderful. Fucking track name is great. Mark's guitars are fucking like all of those guitar parts are absolutely insane.
They give you some Polyphia point of view where you get in there and you see what those fingers are really up to, and it's out of control.
You see,
you didn't know fingers could do those
you see
thing.
how they're finagling those strings.
Right.
It's insane.
And then it ends with a fucking Marvel Cinematic Universe tie-in where like we unmask one
Someone
of
was
the protagonists in this
They
video.
get
Right? There's a lot
unmasked.
going on in this video. You're gonna go fucking watch it. But like this band has been imprisoned, and they're forced to perform deathcore songs,
who?
and then somebody with a katana shows up to save them. But they've been imprisoned by Spencer Sotelo from Periphery, and theoretically, I believe this is a tease for Spencer to be on the next song, because if it's not, I'll be furious.
Literally like a fucking M. Night Shyamalan twist.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this person? Who is
We're
this
tying the
masked
Not to Gent
evil?
universe together. You know what I mean? It's like Marcus Bridge going to show up in the next song.
That's what they're not telling us, is that is a double album.
That's a good point.
One side is Periphery, the other is Veil of Maya.
God, I love the idea of a split album. Not a split EP, but a full-on split album.
Kind of brilliant.
Brand of Sacrifice have released their brand new track, Dynasty. New EP, Between Death and Dreams, releases April 21st and will also include the previously released single, Exodus.
4 tracks on this EP. So far, 2 for 2. Dynasty fucking rules. Exodus was a fucking banger. I feel like Brand of Sacrifice gets their proper due hype-wise, but maybe they haven't received it on this show, which is why I'm here to tell you that Brand of Sacrifice is a top 5 deathcore band at the moment.
Let's talk about what Brand of Sacrifice does best. Is they not once ever underspend the budget on a music video, and I appreciate that. Because I feel like, man, you know, it's so fucking funny. I was thinking to myself, what was the single rollouts for Paramore and Pierce the Veil, 2 of the biggest fucking bands in this scene? First one, music video, top tier, lot of money. Second one, music video, you know, in Paramore's case, still pretty top tier. Pierce the Veil feels like we toned it back slightly. Third single, visualizers, lyric videos. And it's like, how are you the biggest band in this scene and there's not a budget for your third music video? And then we come over here to Brand of Sacrifice and CGI hellscapes, fully utilizing every last cent the label allowed us.
I love that.
But that's been them fucking everything. It's like every time this band drops something, it's like, hey, here's another part of the Berserk storyline brought to life in a fucking music video. Brace yourself.
Really setting them up to fail when this third single inevitably is a visualizer.
No, I'm putting them in a position where they can't do that. Do you understand what I mean?
Checking them?
Right. That's precisely correct. I'm checking Brand of Sacrifice. What are the scarier bands to check? Because like, we get fucking angry on we get as angry on this song as we do on every other fucking song, to be fair.
They fucking practically go Super Saiyan on this song. It's just literally just like screaming until they finally just hit like the most immaculate scream imaginable.
There was a part of the song where it felt like I was doing that thing where it was like, I think my senses have been slightly dulled by deathcore, and then Brand of Sacrifice said, hold up, but wait. And like they suddenly like pulled me back in. Now, one thing that pulled me slightly out of this was you pointing out that there were interpretive dancers in a deathcore music video, and I was like,
hey, man,
how does this work?
It's not even just that, but it's just like this specific song and the setting in which because they're also green screened into some random hellscape, and they're dancing. And it's just kind of like, this is weird. This is a little weird, and it doesn't really play in the same way that like, bro, I'm in on interpretive dance. We've talked about this, like Riptide, Beartooth, Fire, all around.
It was like we felt like we had to do something more, but maybe this wasn't the thing we should have done.
Yeah, and that's not to say it's like outright awful, but for me it definitely kind of took me out of the video. And another thing regarding this video, and Brand of Sacrifices is not really at fault here, but I am growing a little tired of this type of video from bands in this scene. We Came as Romans, Miss May I, Brand of Sacrifice has done 3 of these, Currents has done a couple of these.
Drag Me Out. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's in a completely indescribable but somehow post-apocalyptic sci-fi universe that we
Unreal
drop these
Engine,
bands in. Yeah.
Only fake green screen, whatever.
There's not really any distinguishable features, which make them all feel slightly blurred together, which is why you might make a decision to then throw in something like this interpretive dance element to maybe sort of like breathe some personality into it that may not otherwise exist.
I mean, if anything, like Brand of Sacrifice might do these best, but I think
but it's like once you notice a trend in metalcore or deathcore, it's gone too far, right?
Yeah, and trust me, like this isn't, we didn't only just notice this, but I think that this might be the honeymoon period officially coming to an end for me. Like, okay, Brand of Sacrifice have done a couple of these better than any of their peers, and I don't see anyone else switching up the formula visually in any really impressive way, and now it's a lot of just copy and paste, and it's just getting real old real fast.
You're right. It's like now we need to bring some like ingenuity to this idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not even just like, okay, well, I'm not tired of just like the green screen background, whatever. Like that's fine, but it's
You're right, but it's the
framing of
same like
things.
muddied colors.
Yeah.
It's the same general aesthetic. Like,
But it's the framing. It's always like they're always kind of like centered in the middle, or they're on some weird platform that they shouldn't be. It's just so like predictable.
I agree with you. Trash Boat dropped their brand new track, Delusions of Grandeur. They'll be supporting I Prevail this March in the UK alongside Blind Channel, which is a fucking huge European tour. Very happy for Trash Boat to be on that.
Say what you will about I Prevail. They're allergic to bad tours, okay? When I Prevail are going out on tours, allergic to them. I Prevail fucking sets up a tour. You know that support's going to be insane.
Sports Heat. It's absolutely undeniable. It's right there on paper.
Blind Channel's sick. And of course, Trash Boat are awesome. And this is a band for me that the COVID blurring pandemic years really fucked me over, because I thought this album came out last year, and I was
Did
like,
it release
wow,
in
it's a new
2020,
single already?
2020.2, 2020.3? Yeah.
And I'm sitting here like, wow, this is real soon, guys, but it really isn't. And honestly, welcome back, Trash Boat. This song's really sick.
This Welcome Back Trash Boat doesn't like do it enough justice.
Do it justice.
You didn't open the door and let Trash Boat in. They kicked it down. Do you know what I mean? They kicked it down with their fucking energy, which is becoming almost unparalleled within their contemporaries. They kicked it in with their fucking style, which I feel like I remember Toby having style before. But somebody gave the rest of this band permission to have a little fucking style, and then like suddenly everybody's popping.
Right, like I watched this video and I'm just like, oh, what's the drummer wearing? That's a cool shirt. And like everyone's kind of like, they're looking cool, they're playing cool shit. Like what more can you ask
And then
for?
it's crazy how much more engaging a video like this is, just where like we're doing neat camera tricks where we're like panning hard left and hard right to different members of the band versus like the most insane CGI budgeted video I've ever seen in my life, right? It's
Again,
just like
yeah, the Brand of Sacrifice ones are cool. I take this video Trash Boat did over any of that other 3D metalcore shit we've been seeing with like Currents,
because this is
Messiah,
vibrant.
yeah.
There's energy to it. It's loud, like in a really weird way. It's
Yeah.
very attention grabbing in a way that like, here's what we did with less money in
It's
a simpler
inspired.
sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the band really has to fucking work for your attention. And I think they do a fucking great job. And I think they dress good.
I agree.
I think they dress great. Also, I feel like we barely talked about the song, which has this like insanely catchy riff on it. And it feels like Trash Boat are like channeling 3 other cool bands I like all in one singular song.
It's got a really great energy to it, like the entire song. But yeah, that riff really sticks out, and hard not to when you're getting those like cool cuts in the video. Like this is definitely the type of track that like not a whole lot going on in the video, but it boosts the track so much that it makes it such a watchable thing.
I feel like every time I hear a new Trash Boat song, I'm like, this is a fucking coming out party. But sooner or later, it's got to be, right?
Gotta be.
Sooner or later, it fucking has to be.
You would have thought like anything off of, God, gun to my head, I don't remember the name of the album, but like all of the singles leading up to that one, I thought were like, that's
I
it.
vaguely remember the cover art, and that's it. It's bugging the shit out
Right?
of me.
Different something. I don't know. Trash Boat though, Delusions Grandeur. Go check it out. Yonaka also in the news with their new song Panic. This new track is a debut on their new label, Lava/Republic Records. Vocalist Teresa recently teamed up with Jairus Johnson on the track Detonate on for G2 Esports.
Did you check out that track?
Yeah, that one actually didn't click for me as much as I would have hoped it would. And additionally, I think that this song does click for me in that way.
Yeah, agreed. For me, I almost like misinterpreted what that song was when it was released. I was like, oh shit, G2's on this? Let's go. It's like I had no fucking idea that this was actually like a company and this was like them like hiring a couple artists to do like a collaboration and like hype the brand up a little bit. So it was like I went to check it out and I'm like, I don't know, this Yonaka song quite not popping the way I hoped it would be.
What a weird like grab bag of artists to or I guess just the two, but like
but like I'd never heard of G2, so I was like, this is a cool third artist. This is interesting.
It's like,
right?
do they share a manager? Is that why? I don't know.
I don't, and then like I hear this and I'm like, okay, this is actually the Yonaka I was waiting to come back. You know what I mean?
Well, what's funny is like the reason why we were excited initially about that Yonaka X Jairus Johnson song was that like those are two artists that like weirdly have the same energy and attitude.
That's a good point.
And like the fact that that kind of fell flat for me, but then like you put Yonaka just by themselves all over again and it flat out works for me is a little surprising, but like good too, because like, hey, okay, Yonaka's clearly ramping up something, album, EP, whatever, and it's working. It's straight away, it's working again.
Yonaka has almost like an indescribable like energy to their songs.
It's really undeniable. It's really like it rubs off on you.
Yeah, it's very in your face intentionally, and it's attention grabbing for that very reason. And speaking of attention grabbing, the video for this is an absolute fucking trip, where Teresa's like running around with a shopping cart full of like mannequin bodies before they're institutionalized on a moving truck that they're later transitions into them being chained to the front of like a tour bus. There's like so much happening that I ultimately I was like, I enjoyed it, but I couldn't make heads or tails of what it was trying to communicate to me.
Yeah, there is a lot happening in this video, and ultimately nothing happens within all of that different footage and content or whatever, which is fine. But it's also slightly distracting.
Also,
but
like
it makes
another
for like
member
a
of the band like
fairly
jumps in with a little bit of
watchable-
vocals too, and then there's like this cool sort of like contrast between them. And I will say this: it's crazy that we got 2 spelling core songs on the same day. I didn't have it in the news, but we actually reacted to the new song from A Virtue, Anxiety.
ANXIETY.
Yeah, right, precisely. And Panic, PANIC. Right.
Yeah.
Spelling songs back big this year. What do you think?
Maybe there's a renaissance. I don't know if I'm gonna take the over the under on like if this trend is actually gonna continue. But on that same note, I did listen to the new Mod Sun album, and the song Revenge is, you guessed it, spelled out in the chorus.
It's back, and it's big. That's 3 songs in the course of like 2 weeks. It can't not be back at that point. Like,
they're all actually like 3 good ones, so like maybe people are taking note.
Imminence dropped their brand new track, Jaded. Marked as the final chapter of their latest release, Heaven in Hiding, which you can now pre-order the limited deluxe edition of that album. Now, we also reacted to that over on our YouTube channel. Violin core will never not be amazing.
Do you want to know what the floor is for violin core?
Hit me.
Top 3 genre all time.
The floor.
And it's not 3, and it's not 2, Sam.
It's
Violin
like,
core is incredible.
Every time it fucking happens, it's like okay, you know how there are like so many things in your life that are like fucking amazing, you know what I mean? But like you never question like how it works, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like it's like electricity to me. It's like I can't explain to you how it works, but it's incredible, right?
What else?
This fucking violence like metalcore shit is electric.
It's electricity to you. Yeah, you know, I've always said that Imminence are like magicians. You know, here's a new song, here's a card trick. How'd you do it? I don't know, but it's fucking cool. It's fucking sick how you just did that. Another sick song, right? It's nuts.
I think what's so great about this band is just that, like, there's no going anywhere else to get Imminence, right? Like, this band,
No.
by the sole virtue of their quote-unquote gimmick, are completely unlike anybody else within the same space as them.
You're kind of right. They're sort of in a league of their own, and I guess that's why I find myself constantly so attached to this band. And kind of just always keeping an eye on them, waiting to see what their next move is.
Right, like, Imminence never sound like they're ripping off somebody else or, like, delivering a song that you feel like you've heard 100 times before, because there's no other way to get what it is that they're giving you, right?
At most, you've heard it like however many songs this band has. Like, say it's 40 or 50. That's however many times you've heard this.
But it's fucking insane that the scene allows them to continue to operate like this. You know what I mean? It's like absolutely nobody's looking at this band and saying, get the fuck on the phone now and find us one of these guys. You know what I mean? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, we are so behind the eight ball on this. How do we not have a violinist in our metalcore band right
I
now?
love the idea of like some tour manager running his business like a fucking dictator, and he gets on the tour bus and he's like, why aren't you have lessons today? You're supposed to be 2 hours on the violin today. Just one of the random members of the band.
Matty Mullen's literally like throwing his phone at a publicist, being like, get the fuck on the phone
Right. I can see it.
and find us a goddamn violinist.
Memphis with the violin.
It's like, how long are Imminence going to continue to be the future till everybody else fucking catches up? You know what I mean?
It's interesting. It's so, and we're at a really, we're sort of at an impasse, right? Like, this is sort of closing the book on a certain chapter, closing the chapter on this book of Imminence. Somewhere in there is what I'm trying to say.
Closing a chapter,
Yeah.
opening a new book. Yeah, sure.
And clearly, like, this is sort of the end of a certain era of this band, and we're ready to embark onto, at some point, the next album cycle. And you're right, like, it's a competition of just themselves. No one else is coming to take that torch from this band. So, like, really, sky's the limit. I'm really curious to see, like, where things go next, if they decide to get crazier with things, what's going on. I don't know.
You're right, but they almost don't even have to try, because if they just continue to be themselves, they're one of the most spectacular bands of the scene.
But that's the cool thing about Imminence, is that I know they will try.
That's a fair point. The Funeral Portrait dropped their brand new track, Alien.
They say to bring myself down, but they really don't want me to. They'd rather me be like you. 'Cause I'm always looking in this world I just don't fit in. I'm an alien.
This is their first new song of the year, and their second single since signing to Better Noise Music.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie, I missed that first single, and for me, this is the Funeral Portrait rising from the ashes, like a phoenix, a band I once thought dead and probably never returning, just because that's certain bands don't reach a certain level of popularity and they sort of come and go at times. And then Funeral Portrait were, for me, sort of one of those bands where I was like, okay, well, they were cool while they lasted back in like 2015, 16, 17, whenever we really were last invested in them. And they aren't, that, like, if they never caught on then, they're never going to catch on again. But like, here they are, they're back. And I'm really excited about this because I think the Funeral Portrait have always been a very underrated band. And I think that we're picking up mostly where we left off, in that, like, this band still sounds really innovative, really creative.
There's like a mystery and an allure to them as well that I really enjoy, that they are obviously like doing a good job of crafting.
They do like some weird little lore building in this video. And
they refer to their fans as like a cult and stuff, and they almost like do it intentionally in their music videos using like that specific language as well.
The execution's really good too. Like, I watched this video and I'm like, yeah, this is very, this is very much the image and the aesthetic I need for the sound and for the end goal of whatever this band is. And I don't know, I'm still just sort of in shock that they're back.
Well, I mean, it's not just that they're back; is that they're back, and then we get a song
Of
like
course,
this,
on a new
and
label,
it's
too.
like, oh yeah, now I remember why a band like the Funeral Portrait was something that I was so excited about back when I discovered them, right?
Yeah.
And I hear that every single time that they kick into the chorus of this song, and it absolutely, completely enraptures me. So everything about this band feels like it's clicking, and I hope that Better Noise Music is able to help get them in front of the amount of people that I think that the basis of their talent has earned them.
Totally agree. Really great to have this band back. Everyone should go check them out. Again, The Funeral Portrait, new song,
It's a cool
Alien.
fucking video. Yo, somebody's wearing like a crown of thorns, but they're wearing it over like their fucking eyes and shit, bro.
right?
They can't see because they're blinded by religion. In a literal sense, it's very
Blinded
beautiful. And
by
then they take it off, but then they
devotion.
like see the so it's like it's a cool video. Go check it out.
Right, but they take it off and stare out. This is spoilers for the video into the
Spoilers.
blinding lights. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Really great. Attack Attack have released their new single Dark Waves. This is one of the new singles released alongside Paralyzed, Until We Meet Again. The Dark Waves tour starts this May with support from not only Belmont, but also Traitors, Colorblind, and Savage Hands. Quietly stacked tour.
It is a weirdly stacked tour, right? It almost feels like they just like grabbed everyone within like a 50-foot radius and asked them to come join this tour. But it
definitely
weirdly
a
kind of
fun-
works.
It's a fun mixed bill.
It feels very different from that like original Attack tour, even though it didn't quite fully happen, where it was them and like Electric Callboy and like Conquer Divide and
A lot in color.
across the White Water Tower, I think is their name. But it felt like everybody who had
A lot
like
in color. Yes.
yeah, right. Is everybody's like style definitely very much aligned. This feels like there's a significantly bigger range, though. There's a lot of range between the two songs that Attack has put out. Paralyzed Until We Meet Again is more of a low key synth track. It would have felt very at home on Long Time No See, their EP. The other track,
Really
though,
underrated EP as well.
yeah, shit, underrated by everybody but us for what it's worth.
Since Attack has returned from being inactive, I think they've actually really had no misses.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And it feels like everyone who feels like this band isn't hitting exactly on what they want is because they're sort of overly focused on what they want them to be instead of hearing what it is that they're delivering. So when we get a song like Dark Waves, I am like wholly impressed, even though it doesn't fully sound like anything else Attack has really done.
Yeah, and on that note, like I think Dark Waves might be my favorite song I've heard since they've returned. And
It's very strong. You know, I
Yeah.
say it doesn't sound like anything Attack has done. It honestly feels like just an Attack that's been like modernized and sort of brought into like the current day. And for what it's worth,
it's probably what Attack would have eventually sounded like had they never left anyway.
That's precisely correct. And I think that them absolutely nailing this style out of the gate is sort of like, for me, preventing any criticism that I would have otherwise had of it.
Totally agree.
With the one exception that I wish we had a music video for this and not just a visualizer, because I think it would have been fun.
Listen, it's hard too, because especially with Attack, it's like sometimes I don't even remember who's in this band anymore. Like I know it's like
That's a fair point.
one of the Andrews I think is still on drums, and it's like, who really is Attack?
I just
At this
really
point, I
don't
wanna
know. I don't know how to communicate to bands that I fully understand that you need a visualizer to justify putting the song on YouTube in a sense, but I truly, on God, experience the song the same way as if I was listening to it on Spotify, because I immediately turn back to Twitter while I'm listening to it.
And
because you cannot keep my attention with a visualizer unless you fully intend to do something with visualizers that is just like completely abstract or different than what we've become like comfortable with.
I think being in the music industry, you should be inherently creative. And if you're not, that's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah, but the impetus isn't even on the band.
Well,
Like
no. Well,
somebody
yes.
needs to
But-
come along and figure out a way to make visualizers more engaging.
Right.
If we have to somewhere on the budget cut back from an actual music video.
I agree. But where I was going with that is essentially people film commercials on iPhones, right? Like there's so much you can do with just the literal device.
Yeah,
in
but I
your
think there has to be
pocket.
a fear that like you'll cheapen the product a little bit if the video isn't as fully fleshed out as all the other videos that would be in the same realm of comparison.
I'm not saying literally just do it unedited, whatever, but I'm saying like there's probably something a creative can do with that device, like, I don't know.
I mean, what's crazy is that visualizers used to be more engaging. Like, you remember those old like lyric videos for like a Capture the Crown song where it was like you're going in and out of the artwork and like the lyrics are like falling in really fun ways. And it's just like I feel a little bit like nowadays visualizers are like so key and they're all about like vibes. And
It's
for me,
lo-fi.
it's just like there's nothing there that's fully gonna capture my attention.
Our visualizers in this scene have been lo-fi pilled.
I think that's
They're
accurate.
lo-fi pilled.
I think that's 100% accurate. Marcus, before we go, Aaron over on Patreon had a question us asking our thoughts about Danger Kids teasing their return. So this will kind of be our final story here. Danger Kids posted a picture of the band all like in the studio cooking without any real like additional information. This band has been gone for honest to God, like it almost feels like a decade at this point.
Maybe.
Like if you told me that band put out an album in 2014, I remember them touring like
I want to say
7 or 8 years ago.
15 or 16.
So a long time, but what's crazy is since then, Andy, the co-vocalist of that band, has gone on to like produce tracks with Lights and Falling in Reverse
Myth,
and
right?
Myth, yes, has made a huge name for himself as a producer. So it's extremely curious to see how that could then be incorporated into the return of Danger Kids. And part of me wonders is if they almost have like an ace that they didn't or that they had before, but not in this sense. You know what I mean?
Right. Like in-house producer who's clearly incredible at their job.
Who's producing some of the most popular tracks, period.
Right. Who's engaged with all of these other like massive artists that like clearly like going away and doing all of this is also training in a sense that like maybe you're taking back a lot of things with you to Danger Kids you definitely didn't have in the past. Like
right, but at this point it's like a proven track record. Like you're looking at an artist who has come out in the last couple of years or a few years and said like, hey, I know how to make a song absolutely explode. And it's like you have to wonder like if that was there back when Danger Kids was around, like it's almost like the idea that like Danger Kids would have then like been huge and like maybe we alternatively wouldn't have even gotten like this version of Myth. Like it's very interesting.
I think what's most interesting here is that like everything you're saying, I feel like Danger Kids already had back in the day, but you know, like it's, at least from like an explosiveness angle, like I feel like that band in particular was so exciting and so, you know, they were a familiar sound, but they felt so fresh and new, and they felt like they were really that. I remember Danger Kids came at a time like maybe I want to say like 2014 or something, where I think everyone had really started to grow real tired of what was going on in this scene in terms of like, that's when all your favorite scene bands growing up were dropping like their worst material, and like 2014-15 really fucking sucked. But then like there was this renaissance, you had all this, you had an injection of new blood, and Danger Kids was one of them. And for a long time it felt like, 'cause I think they dropped 2 albums.
They did, yeah, that's correct.
Like, but between that debut coming out and then the singles to that new, the second album, the sophomore, it felt like, oh yeah, this band's about to explode. Like they could explode as soon as tomorrow.
Right. So like Danger Kids is about to get what they've deserved.
And I think what's cool about Danger Kids is like, I think that sound that they had back in the day was, I guess fresh then, and it's maybe a little less fresh now because maybe some other bands are trying it, but I have a really good feeling that we can sort of pick up where we left off and it'll sound as fresh and exciting as it did then.
I mean, what's interesting about Danger Kids is that when they came out, they were essentially just like a compilation of all of these other artists that came before them and kind of like mesh their styles together.
Pretty much.
So for them to almost come back and do that all over again would be fun. Hey, follow us at SOTS Podcast on all social media, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Fucking goodbye.